quick review of chapter 6, and then we'll look at chapter 7 today. So, chapter 6, Krishna is presenting an alternative way in which you can be liberated. And this alternate way is to do dhyana yoga. In chapter 5, shlokas 27 and 28, Krishna briefly talks about Ashtanga yoga. And so that is the connector to chapter 6, where he will talk in a little bit more detail about Ashtanga yoga. What are the angas? What is the process? There are 2 stages in the Ashtanga yoga, which I did not specifically call out, but you can see it in shloka 3, where Krishna talks about the neophyte practitioner and the advanced practitioner in shloka 3. For one who is a neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. What does that mean? So let's go back to this diagram of the eightfold process. If you look at this diagram, what Krishna is meaning when he uses the word a neophyte practitioner of dhyana yoga, he's talking about those who are practicing yam, niyam, asan, pranayam, and pratyahara. So these 5 of the 8 angas, the practitioners of these 5 are called yoga rurukshaha. Rurukshaha means neophytes. And then the final 3, the dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, these are what Krishna is referring to as one who's already elevated in yoga. So these elevated personalities in yoga are called yoga ruda. So the neophytes are yoga rurukshuhu, and then the advanced practitioners are called yoga ruda. So the first 5, yam, niyam, asan, pranayam, and pratyahar, is called yoga rurukshuhu, neophytes. They are still trying to come to that stage of perfection. They are a little way away from concentration, absorption on the Supreme, and union, and final union and integration. So the shloka 3 is a reference to these 2 categories of practitioners within dhyana yoga: the neophytes and those who are advanced. The neophytes are the first 5 of the 8, and the last 3 of the 8 are the advanced practitioners. And then we learned that Krishna also talks about the mind. The mind can be a friend, the mind can be an enemy. If it is a friend, then our life seems to be under control. However, if we don't control the mind, it can be it can create a chaotic situation for us. It can create a lot of doubts, anxiety, fear, inability to take action. So these are things that if one does not try to engage the mind in higher levels of activities on the spiritual platform, it can really give you trouble. And of course, it can lead you to take the wrong decisions, and therefore you keep trapping yourself in the cycle of sin. Then Krishna talks about the symptoms of those who are in the yoga ruda stage. What are their qualities, how they see everybody as equal. They are friends of everybody and they see everybody as their friends. They don't see any duality anywhere. So what are the qualities of one who's really an advanced practitioner of dhyana yoga? Krishna talks about in shlokas 7 to 10, where they see God in everything and all things that are, they don't see the duality of things like friends, enemies, worthy, unworthy, rich, poor. They don't recognize or pay particular attention to the varnashramas, etc. And then Krishna talks in detail about how this yoga should be practiced in shlokas 10 to 17, where he says, first you have to find a secluded place. The place has to be a holy place, a clean place. You have to sit at a certain height. You have to put kusha grass. On top of that kusha grass, you have to put a deer skin. On top of that deer skin, Krishna says you have to lay out a piece of soft cloth and then sit on it and begin your practice of the asanas, etc. And then he talks about how the eyes have to stay focused in the middle of the brow, the breathing pattern. So he goes into the details of all of how Ashtanga Yoga actually is practiced. I think it covers around 26 shlokas, the actual details of how Ashtanga Yoga is practiced. And in shlokas 16 and 17, Krishna also talks about how a practitioner regulates certain activities. So they cannot eat too much, they cannot eat very little. They cannot sleep too much, they cannot sleep very less. They have to mind what kind of habits that they're engaged in, especially when it comes to recreation. And they also have to worry about the type of work that they do. So essentially, Krishna reiterates that even to practice dhyana yoga, you have to regulate your activities. And the perfectional stage of Ashtanga yoga is when the mind is completely under control. It is steady. The mind rejoices in itself. It's able to relish itself and rejoice in itself also. And ultimately, it experiences freedom from miseries that essentially arise because of our contact with material nature. And then in shlokas 24 to 26, Krishna talks about the methods to come to that yoga ruda stage, which is, he talks about determination, faith, not deviating from the path, how you have to take every process step by step, how the mind ends up in a state of trance, how the mind, so Krishna also talks about two stages of realization here. The first stage for a dhyana yogi is to realize self. Self-realization is the first aspect. The second stage of realization is realization of super self. So essentially, realization of Atma first, and then the next stage is realization of Paramatma and the connection between the two. So two stages of realization dhyana. Realization of Brahman and realization of Parabrahman happens. So the realization of Atma is called Brahma Bhuta. And the realization of Paramatma is called Brahma Samsparsha stage. So these are the two terms that you will come across in the shlokas, Brahma Bhuta and Brahma Samsparsha stage. And ultimately how this self-realized person sees the presence of divinity in everything, both inanimate and inanimate. Such a self-realized soul sees divinity all around. And then Arjuna has a doubt. After Krishna talks about practicing Ashtanga Yoga as a way and means to control the mind, Arjuna says It's too difficult to control the mind. It's not practical to control the mind. And Krishna responds by saying, yes, it is difficult, but it is feasible to control the mind by practice and detachment. Abhyasena and vairagyena. These are the two terms that Lord Krishna uses. He acknowledges that it is difficult to control the mind, but he also says with effort, one can bring the mind under control if one is determined through practice and through detachment. So these are the two things that Krishna talks about in Shloka 6.35. And then Arjuna asks, of all the different yogis who practice their various paths, what happens if they do not succeed in this lifetime? And what happens if they give up? For whatever reason, the process is interrupted, they don't continue with it. So let's say, for example, somebody does dhyana yoga for some time and gives it up, or somebody practices bhakti yoga for some time and gives it up. There is an interruption. For whatever reason, it doesn't matter what the reasons. So Krishna says, he talks about three things. He says, there is no failure in the sense that there is no loss for these individuals who've practiced it for some time and for whatever reason gave it up. Because he says what will happen is they will go to the top planetary systems, they will enjoy themselves for whatever credits that they've accumulated. Then they'll come back and take birth either in an aristocratic family, Srimatam Gehe, which is in a family that is very wealthy. And then finally Krishna says, if they are not born in aristocratic family, which is a family of Brahmanas, or a family that is very wealthy, he says, if they're lucky, and this is rare, Krishna says, they can even take birth in a family of devotees. So that from childhood, they get to practice Krishna consciousness again and become more elevated on the transcendental platform. So these are the three things that Krishna talks about. And then Krishna says of all of the four paths, the dhyana yogi is the best because the most difficult thing to achieve. But then Krishna ends with his opinion saying that, in my personal opinion, the bhakti yogi is supreme because of the intimate relationship that he has with the Supreme Lord. So that's how chapter 6 actually ends. And today we're going to, what happens is that chapter 6 sets the stage for the next section of the Bhagavad Gita. And essentially what Krishna is now going to start talking about, he's talked about the dhyana yogi. Now he's going to begin to talk about the exalted position of bhakti yoga. In that context, he will talk about himself in chapter 7 and how great he is. And in the subsequent chapters, he will talk about, I may be great, but my devotees are greater than me. And my devotees are greater than me because they practice bhakti yoga without any motivation for anything from me and without any interruption in their devotional service to me. And because they don't ask anything of me, I become fully indebted to them. So Krishna says in the Bhagavatam, when you read the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Krishna says to the gopis, when the gopis exhibit so much selfless love for him, Krishna says, I really don't know how to repay you all. He says, I am deeply indebted to the love and service that you are offering me. And Krishna says, really, the payment that you should be satisfied is, he's telling the gopis in Vrindavan, as well as Srimati Radharani, that the payment, because I cannot repay this debt, because you're serving me so selflessly and not asking for anything in return. Therefore, I am automatically indebted to you because you don't want anything from me. All you want to do is serve me without any motivation and without any interruption. And therefore, Krishna tells the gopis, the actual payment itself for you is the process of you offering your service to me. So he says the process itself is the payment. So now you can understand, for those who attended the chapter 4.9 class, now you can understand why the definition of a devotee is unmotivated, uninterrupted service to the Supreme Lord, such that it pleases him. And therefore, the devotee does not even ask for moksha, does not ask for liberation, does not ask to come back to Golok Vrindavan. The devotee is happy wherever he or she is, as long as they are able to practice Bhakti Yoga. So Krishna is telling the Vrajavasis, especially the gopis, you should be happy and satisfied that you're able to practice Bhakti Yoga because I do not know how to repay you. So the process of Bhakti Yoga itself is the means and the end. It is the process and the result. It's both, which is actually very unusual. So I think Satya Prasad Prabhu was asking, how do you set goals for yourself? And I had said, not to worry about goals, just enjoy the process, because exactly that's what Krishna tells the gopis. The payment and the reward is the opportunity for us to offer devotional service to Krishna. That itself is our payment. We don't ask Krishna for anything else because we feel the opportunity to serve the Lord itself is so rare and so unique and so unusual and so fulfilling and so filled with bliss. We don't need anything else. We don't need moksha. We don't need wealth. We don't need anything else, because the process of performing Bhakti Yoga itself is liberating and itself gives you bliss. So if that process itself is liberating and gives you bliss, then there's really no need to ask Krishna for anything else. As long as he's giving you the freedom and time to practice Bhakti Yoga, that's all you really care about. So from chapter 7 to 12 begins the Bhakti Yoga section of the Bhagavad Gita. Here we're going to learn a little bit more about who the Lord is. So you could consider this section to be the job interview. You know, we said in chapter 3, Krishna is offering Arjuna a job. And Arjuna has asked a few questions to clarify in the first 6 chapters. Now, Arjuna is going to use whatever Krishna tells him from chapter 7 to 12 to make the decision whether he wants to work for Krishna or not. Now, how in the corporate world or in the world of us trying to find a job, how do we make a decision? There are several factors when we decide to take a job, right? What is the compensation package? What are the terms and conditions? What is the bonus that's being offered? What's the insurance policy? What's the health insurance policy? What are the variable components of your pay? How are you going to be evaluated? What is your career path, opportunity, and progression prospects in that organization? And one more factor that you're interested in is, who are you going to be reporting to? What kind of person do you want to work for? Is that person going to be a micromanager? Is that person going to give you freedom? Is that person going to trust you? Uh, is that person allow you to flourish in your job? So all those questions, even when it relates to spirituality, matter for us to decide whether we want to surrender to Krishna and work for him. So you could consider these next 6 chapters as the actual job interview. But this is a reverse job interview. It's not Krishna asking Arjuna questions. It's Arjuna asking Krishna questions to decide if he wants to work for the big boss. So the single word summary for today's chapter is boss. Krishna is the absolute boss, right? There's nobody else above him. So in chapter 7, Krishna is going to talk about himself and how great he is. So now, naturally, in the material world, when somebody talks about themselves, you may think, how egotistical is this person talking about himself? But Krishna is not being egotistical. He's just stating facts to tell Arjuna, this is his position. This is the authority that he holds. This is his supremacy. So in this chapter, Krishna is going to emphatically establish his supremacy as the absolute boss of everything that exists in this world. Right? When we read the Ishopanishad first verse, Purnamadam, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamudachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. So in that particular shloka in the Ishopanishad, it says that the Lord is perfectly complete and completely perfect. And the Lord's creation is perfectly complete and completely perfect. So Krishna being the boss, the word absolute boss actually takes on a few meanings. When we use the word absolute and when we reference Krishna, it automatically includes all of his energies. So there is Shaktiman and there is Shakti. Shaktiman is Lord Krishna. Shakti is represented by Srimati Radharani. Shakti also includes Prakriti. Shakti also includes the Jivatmas. So anytime we refer to Krishna, it automatically includes his energies and the material cosmos. So when you say sun god, it automatically includes the light and heat emanating from the sun. You cannot separate the energy from the energetic. So when we talk about Krishna, the Shaktiman, automatically we include the energies or the Shakti as well. But Shaktiman separates into two for the purposes of performing Leelas. So Krishna's pleasure potency, Radharani, splits away from Krishna so that the two of them can perform their Leelas. Otherwise, Srila Prabhupada explains that Krishna is like the male god and Srimati Radharani is the female goddess. They are non-different. They are one and the same, except when they separate from each other for the purposes of performing their leelas. So our acharyas say one can never separate the energy from the energetic because the energy's source of origin is the energetic. So when you talk about the energetic, you automatically include the energy. So when you talk about Krishna, it automatically includes Srimati Radharani, Yogamaya, Mahamaya, the Jivatmas, and all of this cosmos. So when we use the word absolute boss, Technically speaking, we are including ourselves in that definition. But then what is Krishna's position? Why is he called the absolute boss, even though we are part of that equation? So in this chapter, Krishna explains that he's the owner of everything. So how is Krishna establishing his supremacy in chapter 7? He says he's the owner of everything. And the terminology for this is Adi Bhuta. And then he says he's the controller of everything. The term for that is Adi Daiva. He controls everything through the Devatas. He assigns them all of these jobs. But ultimately, he is the Adi Deva. He is the god of the Devatas. Through the Devatas, he is controlling everything in the material cosmos. And he is also the enjoyer of everything, Adi Yajna. Another name for Lord Krishna is Yajna Purusha. As he says in chapter 5, Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam. So he is the enjoyer of all sacrifices and austerities. So if you notice, Hiranyakashipu was actually praying to Lord Brahma to fulfill his desires. You will learn in this chapter that the demigods have designated authority. So technically speaking, although Lord Brahma grants the boon to Hiranyakashipu, he cannot grant that boon without the sanction of Krishna. So even the demigods have limited authority. The absolute authority is Krishna. So the word absolute boss means Krishna is Adi Bhuta. He's the owner of everything. He's Adi Daiva. He's the controller of everything. And Adi Yajna. He's the enjoyer of everything. He's the father of religion. He's the father of everything, animate and inanimate. So let's look at chapter 7. So before we begin, let's offer our obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So Krishna is going to begin this chapter by talking about the importance of hearing. So you will see in many chapters, in chapter 4, in chapter 7, and in subsequent chapters, Krishna is going to ask Arjuna, hear carefully. Are you hearing me? Are you listening? So hearing is such an important process of learning. So Krishna is going to begin by telling Arjuna, hear attentively because I'm going to give you some important information. And what is that important information? That he's the source of everything, he's everywhere, he's the essence of everything that exists. Krishna says, without me, nothing will function. So this is how he establishes himself as God, as Bhagavan. And then Krishna will talk about two categories of, two different sets of individuals. Those who accept him as God and those who reject him as God. And there are 4 in the category of accept, and there are 4 in the category of reject. So total 8 kind of people. 4 who accept and approach Krishna, and 4 who reject and do not acknowledge Krishna. And then a very interesting topic of worshipping demigods. It's also a difficult topic for a lot of us to accept. Krishna will criticize demigod worship in this chapter. But we'll get to the shlokas to understand why he criticizes demigod worship. He says for those who want to worship the demigods, they can, but those who are smart and intelligent, they will not worship the demigods, he says. So we'll figure out what he really means by that. So today's acronym is HEAD. It begins with hearing the fact that Krishna is everywhere and is the essence of everything. There are two broad categories of personalities that accept or reject Krishna, which is essentially devotees or the pious and the impious, and then demigod worship. So Krishna begins with hearing. So let's look at the first three shlokas. The Supreme Personality, by the way, what is the title for today's chapter? It is Jnana Vijnana Yoga. What is the difference between Jnana and Vijnana? What is Jnana?
Knowledge.
Intelligence, mother.
Jnana is knowledge, Vijnana is science.
Vijnana is
Science.
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 Science. Vijnana.
Okay. What is that, Ramesh Prabhu? What is Vijnana?
Vijnana is knowledge, Mataji. Jnana is intelligence.
Anybody else?
Now, is it material knowledge and spiritual knowledge?
No. It could be, but that is not the. I guess you could say that is one meaning, but there's one different element here. What is missing in Jnana that is there in Vijnana?
Experience.
Experience, yes.
Vijnana is with the head and Jnana heart.
I would say it's the opposite. Jnana is intellect. Vijnana is actually realization. So the difference is knowledge and wisdom. So Jnana is knowledge. Vijnana is wisdom. How can you get to the stage of wisdom without practice? Is that possible?
No.
Not possible, right? So Jnana is theoretical knowledge without practice, not backed up by practice. You actually become wise when you practice what knowledge you have been undertaking to learn. Only when you practice what you're learning, you will come to realizations. And therefore, the difference between Jnana and Vijnana is practice. Jnana is knowledge, Vijnana is wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience, and experience comes from practicing and making mistakes, right? We learn more from our mistakes than we learn from our successes. Is that correct? We didn't learn to walk without falling down at some point in time. But when we fell down, we got up and tried again. And that, of course, was instinct. But later on in life, we have to push ourselves even if we fail, because we don't have a choice to stand still. Somehow or the other, the forces of life will impel you forward. Whether that forward is positive or not, we don't know. If we want it to be positive, then we have to be very conscious of how we are making decisions. So Jnana, Vijnana, knowledge and wisdom. There's a difference between the two. The difference is in practice. So coming back to the slides here, or rather. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Now hear, O son of Pritha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. I shall now declare unto you in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and numinous." Phenomenal and numinous means that which can be observed and that which cannot be observed, but can be deduced through results. This being known, nothing further shall remain for you to know. So Krishna is saying, whatever I'm going to tell you, You accept it as the absolute truth. Beyond this, you don't need to know anything else. Whatever I am going to tell you is going to be complete in and of itself. You don't need to aspire to research anymore. So now, Krishna will say, out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection. And of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. So we can relate this back to Shloka 4.9, where Krishna says, those who understand my transcendental nature and the divine nature of my Leelas, they don't have to take birth again. But in this chapter, Krishna will clarify that the number of people who qualify for that statement that Krishna makes in 4.9 is very few. Very few achieve that status. So now from Shlokas 4 onwards, Krishna is going to talk about how he's the source and essence of everything. So we are just going to read a few shlokas so you get a gist. What I would like you to do is every time we do a chapter, I want you to just go to Vedabase and read the English translation of the shlokas. At least you should know, because I cannot cover every single shloka in this summary version, but at least you know the trajectory of Krishna's revelations to Arjuna. So he says, he begins by talking about his different types of energies: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these 8 constitute my separated material energies. What does Krishna mean when he says separated material energies? And Prabhupada uses an example here. We said Shakti and Shaktiman cannot be separated, right? So now we're going to give an example of from the material world of how it is separated. Prabhupada uses this example. For example, a cow produces milk by eating grass. So technically speaking, milk is the energy of the cow. But when the milk comes out and is taken out, then it becomes separated from the cow. So a mundane example of what Krishna means by separated material energy. So the first 5 elements, Krishna says, they separate from me. And therefore, although they are my energy, they separate from me to perform a particular task. So he's saying these are, and he's including mind, intelligence, and ego here, not just the 5 basic elements. Besides these, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mind which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. So this material energy, Krishna is saying, is inferior, is his inferior energy. So what is his superior energy? It is the Jivatmas, who are utilizing the resources of the inferior material energy to satisfy their desires. So 2 different kinds of energies: inferior energy, superior energy. Inferior energy, you can say, is just Prakriti, represented by Maya Devi. That does not mean Maya Devi is inferior. It does not mean Durga Devi is inferior to us. No, no, no. It's just that the energy that she oversees are considered inferior energy because they don't have consciousness. Then the superior energy that has consciousness is actually exploiting this inferior energy called Prakriti. So then Krishna says, all created beings have their source in these 2 natures. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. So Krishna is saying, I create everything, I destroy everything. So what does Krishna mean when he says, I create everything and destroy everything? We thought Lord Brahma creates and we thought Lord Shiva destroys. True. That fact is also true. But before Shiva and Brahma were present, somebody else created and somebody else destroys. Who is that? That's Mahavishnu. Why? Because from Mahavishnu comes, from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu comes Lord Brahma. So what does Mahavishnu do? We said that Mahavishnu is an expansion of Mahashankarshan or Balaram. So when Mahavishnu gets ready to create the material cosmos, when he breathes out, all of the material universes are created. And when he's ready to take his in-breath, all the material cosmos goes back into the body of Vishnu. So that's why Lord Krishna is saying, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. But once the material cosmos is created, then Lord Brahma and Mahavishnu and Shiva do the creation, maintenance, and destruction. So there is one creation and maintenance and destruction within the material cosmos. And the material cosmos itself, when it has to be wiped clean, that's when Mahavishnu breathes in and everything goes back into his body. So all the Jivatmas go back into resting state in Lord Vishnu's body. And when Lord Vishnu is ready to create again, those Jivatmas who still have karma left that they have to experience, they will come back and take birth again when Lord Vishnu gets ready to create again. So that's how the process is actually explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's what is meant by this particular shloka. Then the Lord says, O conqueror of wealth, there's no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. So if you look at a pearl necklace, you will not be able to see the thread. You will only see the pearls. But that doesn't mean the thread doesn't exist. The pearl looks so beautiful because of the invisible thread. Similarly, Krishna is saying, I am that thread that holds all of the material cosmos together. As the thread, I may not be visible and apparent to you, but that does not mean I don't exist. So Krishna is using this analogy. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung or resting on a thread. And from here on out, Krishna is going to give examples of how he's the essence of everything. O son of Kunti, I am the taste of water. I am the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. I am sound in the ether. I am ability, any ability that a man has, whether it is beauty, strength, intelligence, fame, all that ability, Krishna says, comes from me. I am the original fragrance of the earth, and I am the heat and fire. I am the life of all that lives. Krishna says he is the digestive power in us. If he didn't exist as heat, we would not be able to digest our food. And I am the penances of all the ascetics. O son of Pritha, know that I am the original seed of all existence. So Krishna is saying he is the source of all creation. He is the original seed, the intelligence of the intelligent and the prowess of all powerful men. Intelligence comes from Krishna. Power comes from Krishna. Then strength comes from Krishna. I am the strength of the strong, devoid of passion and desire. I am sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles. So Krishna is talking about the institution of marriage here. O Lord of the Bharatas, know that all states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am in one sense everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of material nature, for they, on the contrary, are within me. The modes of material nature means Rajagun, Tamogun, and Sattvagun. Deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Yeah. So we'll come back to the chapter. So it begins with, hear carefully, Arjuna, because I'm about to reveal myself to you. This knowledge that I'm about to give you is very rare. And I only give this kind of knowledge to my devotees, to my friends. So please, let's recite the shloka. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha
Shri Bhagavan
Bhagavan
Vacha
Vacha
Maya Sakta Manah Partha
Maya Sakta
Sakta
Manapata
Manapata
Yogam Yunjanmadashrayah
Yogam
Yunjanmadashrayah
Janmadashraya
Srayaha
Asamshayam Samagram Mam
Asamshayam
Samsayam
Samagram
Samagramam
Yatha Gnasya Chitakshunu.
Yata
Yata
Jnasasi Tat
Yata
Shunu.
So we've already read the translation. So Krishna is talking about hearing as a means to acquire knowledge, and it's an important process for us to acquire knowledge. We discussed this in the Secrets of Gita Revealed, so I'll not go into too much details here. We talked about Pratyaksha Praman, which is just by direct perception alone, we learn so many things. By Anumana Praman, we can use logic to come to certain conclusions. And that's logic is one way, or reasoning is one way we can come to conclusions. So for example, if we say laws, that means there is a lawmaker behind it. The laws didn't just come up out of thin air somewhere. If we say creation, that means we have to acknowledge there's a creator behind it, because creation doesn't happen accidentally. But then there is something called deductive knowledge. Deductive knowledge means it's a descending process. It comes from the parampara. So for example, when we are growing up as children, your parents will tell you this is a table, this is a chair, this is the sun, this is the moon, which means initially we are learning not through Pratyaksha Praman or Anumana Praman. We are learning through Shabda Praman. We are hearing. Our parents are constantly teaching us, this is this, this is that, this is this, this is that. If you touch the fire, you will hurt yourself. Like that. Just vocal, oral instructions is how babies begin to learn. So when your parents are teaching you these things, you don't challenge them. We simply accept what our parents say as absolute truth. Because there is no parent that will point to a table and say, my dear child, this is a sofa. My dear child, this is a pillow. Because the parent has no interest in fooling you. Correct? That is why we consider our parents, especially the mother, to be the first guru. Yes or no? Isn't that how we learn? Do we challenge our parents and say, no, I disagree with you, it's not a table, I will do some research and come back and tell you whether I agree with you or not? We don't waste time, right? One is because we don't know. Therefore, we accept. But then as we grow older, what happens? Our ability to discriminate comes into force. And at that time, when we start exercising our free will, we accept or reject Shabda Brahman And slowly we start relying on direct perception or hypothesis and logic to believe or disbelieve things. So similarly, on the spiritual platform, our journey has to begin with Shabda Praman. Just like we trusted our parents to always teach us the right thing, and we didn't question them. Similarly, on the spiritual journey, we are little babies. We know nothing about God. Therefore, we have to accept what the acharyas and gurus tell us without questioning. The questioning can come later. The understanding will come the more you hear. If you're a baby and you start arguing with your parent, no, this is not a table. No, that's not a chair. No, you're lying to me. That's not the sun. It will be a pretty chaotic situation for us. So similarly, because we are babies when it comes to spirituality, we have to simply accept the Shastra and what the sadhus say. Because they have no interest in misleading you. They are only interested in you understanding what is the absolute truth. Of course, we're talking about bona fide scriptures and bona fide gurus. There are plenty of fake gurus today. If you want to get cheated, there are plenty of them available that we can pay some money and get cheated. But a genuine bona fide guru has no interest in misleading you when it comes to the absolute truth. Right? So we talked about this. How do you know that your father is your father? You simply accept it. If your mother said this is your father, you just accept it. This is your father. That's it. Bus over. You wouldn't say, no, I want DNA proof or whatever else it is that you want to do to prove or disprove a particular aspect. So similarly, how can we know Krishna? If the guru says, this is your eternal father, you just accept it. I mean, what are you going to do to try and prove and disprove this? We are so insignificant in this cosmos. How are we going to prove and disprove that God exists? We don't have the capacity, we don't have the intelligence to do that. So if Guru says, this is your eternal father, you just accept it. If scriptures say Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan, you accept that Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan. What kind of research can I do to prove or disprove this? So we do not speculate and we do not guess when it comes to the absolute truth. So hence our Shastras say the best way to acquire knowledge is through Shabda Praman, through the process of hearing. Now, we read the shlokas where Krishna says he's the source of everything, he's the essence of everything. And just by looking at everything around us, including when we take a sip of water, Krishna says, I am the taste of that water. The reason water tastes good to you is because Krishna is present in that water. So in everything around us, we can see Krishna's hands. Essentially, that's what Krishna is saying here. He'll have a similar theme in the next chapter again, where he talks about many more examples and analogies. So he's the source of both matter and spirit. Matter in the form of Prakriti, the 5 elements, including the mind, intelligence, and ego. He is the source of the superior energy called the Jivatmas. And he is the ultimate source of everything. So he says he is the source of all things animate and inanimate, and all things material and spiritual. He's the source. So essentially, he's the cause of all causes, Sarva Karana Karanam. That is Krishna. He's the origin and source of everything. Shakti and Shaktiman. Bhumi Rapo Nalo Vayuhu.
Bhumi Rapo Nalo Vayu.
Ammano Buddhirevacha.
Mano buddhireva cha
ahankara iti yamme
ahankara yamme
hinna prakritirashtada.
vinna
Prakatir
ashtada.
Ashtada.
I think this is actually Shloka 7.4, which we read. Pareyammitastwanyam
Pareyam
Pareyamitasva
itastvanyam
prakritim vidhi me param
Prakritim
prakritim
Vidhi
vidhi
Me
me
Param.
param
jiva bhutam mahabaho
Jiva
jiva
Bhutam Mahabaho.
mahabaho
yayedam dharyate jagat.
Yayedam
idam
Dharayate
dharayate
Jagat.
jagat.
Here Krishna is talking about the jivatmas who are exploiting inferior energy to survive. So here Krishna says he's the light of the sun, he's the taste of the water, he's the sound of the ether, he's the intelligence in the intelligence. Any ability that you see in any man, it comes from Krishna. The unseen is proven by the seen. Mattah parataram nanyat
Matta
Parataram
Parataram
nanyat
Nat
kinchid asti dhananjaya
kinchit
Kinchit
asti
Asti Dhananjaya.
dhananjaya
mai sarvamidam prottam
Mai
Sri
sarvam
Sarvam
idam
Idam Protam.
protam
sutre manigana iva.
Sutre
manigana
Manigana
iva.
Iva.
So here Krishna is saying what we read earlier, O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. So now we're going to come to an interesting section where Krishna talks about the pious and the impious. Essentially, the Shuras and the Ashuras, or the Daivas and the Ashuras. Daivas, another meaning for the word Daiva is also pious. All the Devatas are considered pious. So Krishna says there are 4 kinds of men who never surrender. And then there are 4 kinds of men who surrender. Of the 4 kinds of men who surrender, Krishna says the Jnani is better. And then he says again in this chapter, devotee is very rare. Okay, this is an important shloka that Prabhupada quotes again and again and again in his lectures. So let's recite the shloka. Daivishyesha gunamayi
Daivi
Gunamayi
Gunamayi.
mama maya duratyaya
mama
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 maya
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 duratyaya
Duratyaya.
Duratya
mam eva ye prabhadyante
Mam
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 Eva
eva ye
Eva Ye
prapadyante
Prapadyante.
Padyante
mayam etam taranti te.
mayam
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 Etam
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 taranti
Tarante.
me.
Tarante.
So here Krishna is giving us a warning and a solution. The warning for us is that this Sattvagun, Rajagun and Tamagun are very difficult to overcome. Because remember in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, if you are in Tamagun, you should try and come to Rajagun. If you are in Rajagun, you should try to come to Sattvagun. Once you've come to Sattvagun, Krishna says you should transcend Sattvagun and come to the Shuddha Sattva state. So Krishna himself is saying how difficult it is for us to overcome the influence of these 3 gunas. And then he is giving a solution to overcome these 3 gunas. And the only solution Krishna says is you have to surrender to me. If you surrender to me, then it's easier for you to come to the Shuddha Sattva platform. If you don't surrender to me, then you are going to be like puppets under the influence of these three gunas. So again, here Krishna is introducing the concept of surrender, that we have to willingly surrender to him out of love, not anything else. So who are the four kinds of men who don't surrender? Krishna uses some very harsh words. So these are Krishna's words. Four kinds. The first one, Krishna says, Moodha, the grossly foolish, hard-working asses. Those who are just running around here and there, trying hard to make a living. They don't have time for practicing spirituality. So Krishna calls them Moodha. Then the next word, adjective that Krishna is using is Naradhama. Uncivilized people considered lowest of mankind. Even worse than the Moodas are those who don't care for what is right and wrong. They just do whatever they want. Krishna is calling them Naradhama. Mayaya apahrita jnana. Oh, then an unexpected category. The intellectuals who have completely rejected Krishna. The atheists who are misleading the other people in society. So Krishna is warning that there are some people who are very intelligent, so intelligent that they've rejected God through their logic. And they end up misleading society because they take on leadership roles. So for example, this concept of communism, right? Propagated by Stalin and Lenin. They were talking about distribution of wealth equally in society because everything belongs to everybody. But in the process, they ended up creating these horrible leaders who took complete advantage of their citizens, accumulated all the wealth for themselves, and deprived basic amenities for their own citizens. So you can have very intelligent people in positions of power because they do not acknowledge God. They end up misleading society. So even in India, we have the Communist Party. You know, although I didn't I've not seen the movie, The Kashmiri Files. I believe there is a movie that has come out. So you can see a certain section of politicians questioning why has this been movie made? It's been made to, this caste system is poisonous. It has spoiled India. They are just talking nonsense because they've not even read the scriptures. If they've read the scriptures and understood it, they are maybe deliberately misleading society. So you have politicians talking Shastra as if they have understood Shastra. If these politicians from certain states have actually read the Bhagavad Gita, they would not have made that statement about caste system. Caste system is very much man-made. So we have to be careful about the kind of leaders that we elect to govern us. Then Ashura Bhavamashrita, the demoniac natured people, the atheists. So in this shloka, Krishna is saying those miscreants, oh, he's calling all four of them miscreants, who are grossly foolish, who are lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons. do not surrender unto me. So Krishna is saying these four kinds of people, they will never surrender to me. Unless they come into contact with a devotee and receive the causeless mercy of a devotee, then maybe their life can change. So now Krishna will talk about the four kinds of people who do approach him. Artha, Artha-arti, Jignasa, and Jnani. So Krishna says all these four people are pious. The first kind of person who approaches me is people who are in difficulty and they pray to me for relief. This is the Artha. Then he says there's a certain category of people who only want all kinds of things from me. They want me to fulfill their desires, sanction their desires. Chalo, they also worship me for that. That's okay. Then he says there's another category of people who are curious. For example, the sages of Naimisharanya, when Sutta Goswami begins to speak the Srimad Bhagavatam, although the sages of Naimisharanya are worried for the people of Kali Yuga and what they are about to experience because of the difficulties that are going to come in Kali Yuga, they are worried for the Jivatmas and therefore they begin to do this 1,000-year yajna and they invite Sutta Goswami to speak the Srimad Bhagavatam. But although they ask those 6 questions of Sutta Goswami, what is the purpose of life? Who is Lord Krishna? Why did he come? What are the pastimes that Lord Krishna performed? That there are other avatars of Lord Krishna. Who are those avatars and what are their pastimes? And then what is the essence of all of the scriptures? And their other question is, after Lord Krishna left, where did Dharma take shelter? When they ask these questions, they are not asking these questions to become devotees of Lord Krishna. They are asking these questions out of intellectual curiosity. So even though they are considered sages, they are not considered devotees of Krishna. They are asking these questions out of intellectual curiosity. So you can have rishis and sages who are occupying the higher planetary systems. Some of them may be devotees of the Lord, but not all of them are devotees of the Lord, although they are considered by Krishna himself to be pious. And then the Jnani is the one who is in search of knowledge, who is in search of the absolute truth, who wants to genuinely know who is this controller controlling everything in this universe. Who is this person? How can I find out more about him? O best among the Bharatas, 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the absolute. So Krishna considers these 4 categories of people to be pious. And of these 4, Krishna says the Jnanis are the best. But out of all the transcendentalists, Krishna again makes a similar statement that he made in chapter 6, last shloka, 47. Here Krishna is saying the bhaktas are the best of the Lord. And then he says the pure devotee is very rare. So please recite after me. Bahunam janmanamante Jnanavan mam prapadyate Vasudeva sarvamiti Samahatma sudurlabha. What is Krishna saying? After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Again, you can link the shloka to shloka 4.9 that we did yesterday. The rarity of a devotee, pure devotee. And what is Krishna saying? Such a devotee is so rare that they go through many births and deaths until they come to the knowledge that yes, Krishna is the Supreme Lord. Yes, I'm ready to surrender to him. Yes, he's the cause of all causes. So even to come to become a pure devotee, Krishna is saying you have to take many births until you perfect. You become that perfect pure devotee. Such a great soul, Krishna says, is very rare. Now, the last section for today, demigods. So Krishna will talk about those who are interested in material desires. He says, I fulfill those material desires through the agency of the demigods. And he says, because they want material desires, I create situations where they are attracted to the demigods and they are attracted to a particular demigod and they become devotees of that particular demigod. So please repeat after me. Kamaistair hritagnyanaha
Kamaistairhritajnanah
prabhadyante nyadevataah
prapadyanteyadevataः
tam tam niyamam asthaya
tam niyamam asthaya
prakritya niyata swaya.
prakriti asvaya.
So those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. So Krishna is saying, first of all, he is criticizing those who worship demigods. He's saying they lack intelligence. He says their intelligence has been stolen. Stolen by what? Desires. And because their intelligence has been stolen by desires, they end up surrendering unto the demigods. And they follow whatever process is established in the Vedas, whatever rituals they need to do. You know, whether it is keeping fast for 40 days, whether it is offering, till or various objects to please the demigods, offering wealth, offering jewelry, taking some sankalpa to satisfy the demigod, saying, if you do this for me, I will do that for you. All this is done by Krishna saying, all this is done by those who have lost their intelligence to their material desires. So demigod worship means you have a lot of desires, material desires, and you're not very intelligent. That's what Krishna is saying. What is the problem with demigod worship? So let's say you go to a pharmacy, or let's say you go to any shop and you ask to purchase chocolate. And the shopkeeper knows that you have a tooth problem. Is he going to sell you the chocolate or not?
He will,
Why will he sell?
because it's business for him.
It's business for him. Does he care about your well-being?
Not really.
Not really. So demigods are similarly in that position. It's like you're going to shop for something. The demigods say, pay the price, I'll give you. The demigods will give you whatever you want because they are in the business of getting something from you and giving you that in return. Therefore, they will satisfy your desires as long as you do your part. So, but the difference with the demigods and Krishna is Lord Krishna will only give you what you need. You can ask for anything from him. But if you surrender to him, he will not give you what you want. He will give you what you need in that particular moment. So sometimes Krishna says, right, these 4 categories of people are pious. Sometimes you are under distress and you may think you know what the right solution is. So you will tell Krishna, can you orchestrate this so this happens? If you have truly surrendered to Krishna, Krishna is not going to listen to you. He's going to do what is actually going to be for your ultimate benefit, even though you may think he's not listening to your prayers. That's because Krishna genuinely cares about your well-being. So whatever the demigods give you will produce temporary result. It's not permanent. So you want something more, you have to run back to the demigod again and worship again. Whereas whatever Krishna gives you is permanent. The other thing Krishna says in the Shastra Krishna says in this chapter, if you worship the demigods and become attached to a particular demigod, and you perform a lot of pious activities, you will go to the planets where the demigods live, which is called Bhuvar Loka. That's going to be your destination. And then Krishna talks about who can actually become a devotee. Yesham tvantagatam papam
Yesham
Twantagatam
tvantagatam
papam
papam
jananam punyakarmanam
Jananam
punyakarmanam
te dvandvamoha nirmukta
te
Dvandvamoha
nirmukta
nirmukta
bhajante mam dridhavrataah.
bhajante
mam
mam
dridhavrataah.
dridhavrataah.
Krishna comes back, you will notice in this middle section, and throughout the Bhagavad Gita, actually, Krishna comes back to how exalted his devotees are. Throughout the Bhagavad Gita, you'll see this theme. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. So Krishna says, if you've led multiple lives of piety, and at the same time you have put a stop to your sinful actions by stopping these materialistic desires, then you become free from dualities. And then you begin to engage in Krishna consciousness. You begin to practice Krishna consciousness. So this is how this chapter ends. Let me just look at a few shlokas here. Yeah, so this is let's read these. So Krishna says, I am in everyone's heart as a super soul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. Now you may ask, if Krishna is criticizing demigod worship, why is he also sanctioning demigod worship? What's the answer to that question? Krishna himself is criticizing those who worship the demigods. But why here in Shloka 21, Krishna himself is saying, if somebody is interested in demigod worship, I sanction it. Why does he do that?
Because the jiva has the free will, so they are willing to perform a particular rituals towards a demigod. So Krishna is allotting the permission to them.
Okay, any other answer?
By satisfying his desire, he can come back to the.
That's the right answer. Krishna thinks and hopes that when your desire is satisfied, you will be so thankful that you will be attracted to Krishna. So both happiness and distress is given to you with the hopes that you will be attracted to Krishna. Distress is supposed to make you remember Krishna, and anything good that happens in life is also supposed to lead you to Krishna. Therefore, Krishna says, okay, chalo, at least you're asking some higher power for something. Correct? At least you've not rejected the Lord and rejected that there is anybody who's controlling anything at all, that you can do whatever you want. So Krishna is acknowledging, at least you're in the mood of approaching some authority for what you want. So by satisfying your desire, one day you will approach me directly. If you have this much amount of faith to believe in and worship a demigod, it shouldn't be too difficult for you to have faith in Krishna and worship him. So by being attracted to the demigod, ultimately you will be attracted to the controller of the demigods. So Krishna says, endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. So Krishna is saying, the devotees who are worshipping demigods, they don't realize I'm the one who's sanctioning it. Okay, you go break 108 coconuts for Ganesha. Ganesha may fulfill your desires. But Krishna is saying, they don't know I'm the one who's sanctioning it. And what is Krishna saying? These benefits are bestowed by me alone, which means the decision is never made by the demigod. They do what the Lord wants. So it's like the shop owner who has put somebody in the shop to sell. He's been instructed, okay, if somebody comes, sell. So ultimately, Krishna has put the shopkeeper to sell the chocolate to you. Krishna has his own way of working. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. Unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, now he's criticizing those who think that he doesn't have a form, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. Krishna is talking about those who think the Lord does not have form. I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them, I am covered by my internal potency, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and infallible. So Krishna is saying, for those who don't want to believe that I am God, I fulfill that desire also. How do I do that? I confuse them and bewilder them through my Yoga Maya potency. My Yoga Maya potency prevents them from seeing me as a Supreme Lord because that is their desire. If they want to reject me, I fulfill that desire also. Oh Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me no one knows. And then Krishna says, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. And then that shloka, persons who have acted piously in previous life and this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are free from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. So Krishna is saying, if you've become my devotee, I think you're very intelligent, because you've come to the right conclusion that you need to be under my shelter and under my protection. They are actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities. Those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of God, even at the time of death. So Krishna is saying, those who've come to the conclusion that Krishna is the supreme controller, he's the Adi Bhuta, he is the supreme enjoyer, he's the Adi Yajna, and he is the Adi Daiva, he is the God of all the demigods. So this is those three terms that we talked about, right? Adi Bhuta, Adi Daiva, and Adi Yajna. That is the summary last verse of chapter 7. So in this last verse, Krishna is establishing that he is the absolute boss. Why is he the absolute boss? Because he is Adi Bhuta, Adi Daiva, and Adi Yajna. So this is how Krishna defines himself as God. So we said in chapter 4.9 when we were doing yesterday, that the definition of God is actually elaborated in chapter 7. So this is where you can understand who Lord Krishna is. And of course, this theme will extend to chapters 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which we will see the rest of this week. So we shall stop here. Vancha kalpatarupyascha